Hello and welcome everybody. In the next series of videos, I wanted to talk to you about continuous integration and continuous deployment from any kind of web application. It could be PHP, it could be .NET, .NET Core, Vue, Angular, React, Blazor, whatever it is. Even if you have a major application in a CMS system, something like Sitefinity or Sitecore or Kentico or any of the other web applications that are making CMS system for content management system as well. The concept here would be the same, which is how to actually use source control and create pipelines to move the different builds from like dev to QA to UAT to production. And then in the second video, we'll take a look at the approval, how to set an approval workflow between the different stages in something like Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions and so on and so forth. In the final video, I wanted to also show you how to deal with that with something called gates. So you can set rules on how the system will move different stages between dev and QA and UAT and production based on gates. So that will be a very, very good feature as well for you to know about. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do, oh, look at that. I shouldn't have worn a green shirt because now I look like the invisible man, but that's okay. Alrighty, let's go ahead and go into the Azure DevOps. I have my own tenant in here, dev.azure.com, and I have my own tenant called Training Boss. I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new project right now, and we'll call this one, we'll call it Lino Gates test, for instance. Sounds good. And we'll say here, we will test approvals and gates. So we know what that is all about. I'll keep it private and we'll say advanced. I'm going to use Git, and here we'll use agile and we'll say create. All right, so right now this project is being created for me. Let's give it a few seconds. And there it is, it's done. And at this point, I can actually go to the repos in here, and you'll see you will be given some instructions on how to clone it into Visual Studio Code or any other product that you'd like to use as well. How to push an existing repository. We will not do that. We're just going to go ahead and try to do it directly from here if I can. So I'm going to say, let's clone this. But before I do that, let's add a README and maybe add a git ignore for Visual Studio. Say put a V in here, and there is Visual Studio should be in here somewhere. Visual Studio, there you go. So we don't have to actually check in any object files or anything that we do not need that will be compiled automatically when somebody pulls my code. All right, let's go ahead and initialize this guy. And there you go. Right now, the only thing I have is my git ignore and the readme. And now I can go ahead and say clone. And I'm going to go ahead and clone it in Visual Studio Code. Let's go ahead and clone that in Visual Studio Code. We'll open Visual Studio Code as well. And you will notice there is a little dialog that came up on another monitor here, allowing me to allow an extension to open a URI. We'll have to say OK on that. And now it will try to bring up a folder in the Explorer in Windows to tell me where would you like to put that in. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the E drive, for instance. Let's go ahead into the E drive, and I'm going to say select this repository. It's already going to create a folder for me automatically. And it will actually also come with another one says, would you like to open the cloned repository? It says yes, open that up. And if I've done my job right, you will notice that Visual Studio Code will come up on the screen, and I will only have two files, the .git ignore and the readme under the Lino Gates test, and that should be under the E drive at that point. Make sense? Excellent. The next step probably would be best if you go and open up the terminal. So we'll say terminal, and we'll open up a new terminal. This will help us a lot to in Visual Studio Code to create a .NET Core application, for instance, or any kind of application. There is template for everything nowadays. So inside of this Lino Gates test, which I'm in right now, I'm going to say .NET, and I of course have the .NET CLI installed on my machine. And we'll use the new command, and here I have millions of things that I can pass. I can say web app that will create actually a .NET Core application for me with pages. I can also say the word razor, and that will do the same thing, believe it or not. There are other things that you can pass in here. One of the best things you can do is probably just say new and just get some help to see all the different things. You see web app or razor, both of them will create an ASP.NET Core app. A Blazor server, class library, console, WinForms. Actually, there are more than that. But for right now, let's go ahead and do web app, and we'll push enter right there. And that will create it in the same folder, which is great. So I can see directory in here. And you'll notice it added everything for us on the side, including my README and my git ignore. So we're in good shape. And it would be nice, of course, if I can commit this into my local repository and also push it to the repository as well if I can. So let's go ahead and click on that. We'll say source control. There are 76 files. So I'm going to come in here, we'll say my initial commit. And instead of just doing a commit, I'm going to do a commit and a push as well. And let's give it a few seconds in here. I should be able to get all these files into my Azure DevOps because already the Git has been established already. And it's done. Excellent. Now let's go back to here. And I'm going to refresh this page. And I should be seeing my entire project. And there you go. Now in my Azure DevOps using Git, I have a repository on the repos for my Linogates test. And everything looks like it's in there and ready to go. Make sense so far? Of course, before you continue, one of the things that you should do just to make sure that everything is working correctly locally on my machine will say .NET build, just to make sure everything builds correctly. And then I'm going to do a .NET run. It will give us the port number for IS Express that will do that. We'll say .NET run. And hopefully within a few seconds it will, okay, it's going to be 5170. That is the random port that was given to us to test this on. So I'm going to go back 5170, let's remember that, and I'm going to go to the local host 5170, and let's see if the application will start. It looks like we're in good shape. That is the welcome sign, and there is the Linogates test for the name of the project. So it looks like we have done a pretty good job and it's all ready to go. And now the next step is to leave all the stuff alone and let's head to Azure and to be able to create different web application, Azure web application as a PaaS system. So I'm going to open up my portal for portal.azure.com. This is my own subscription in here. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and create a new resource group. We'll say create. And I'm going to create one here really quickly and we'll call it, for instance, the Linogates RG for resource group. And I'll put it in the East Coast. That's fine. And we'll say, go ahead and create. And create. All right, perfect. So this will happen really quickly. So let's open this up again. And I'm going to start creating my first resource. My first resource, I want it to be an Azure web app. Say Azure web app. And it will find one right there. And believe it or not, I'm going to actually have to do that 3 times. I'm going to show you why here in a second. So the first one will be put inside of my Linogates resource group. And this one will make it dev Linogates, okay? Which publication would you like to use, code or Docker container or static web app? I'm going to use code because this is a .NET Core application. I'm going to use the .NET 7.0 in here. I'm going to use a Windows machine. I don't have to. I could have used a Linux machine as well. I'm going to put it in the East Coast because I'm in the East Coast. You can put it whatever you'd like, of course. And then, very important, I need to specify what type of a machine this will run on, which is the Windows plan itself. So I'm going to say create a new one, and we'll call it Linogates plan. Alrighty, and we'll say okay there. And that could be a standard S1. There is a lot of options in here if you need more memory and so on. I'm going to go cheap on you today, so I'm going to choose the one that has 1.7 gigabyte of memory with 1 CPU. That's all we're going to need, but usually you're going to get something a little bit more beefy for your websites. And from right now, I'm going to say review and create. And create. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wait a few seconds in here. And this resource would have been created for me. I'm going to stop the video and come back when the resource has been deployed. All right, it is done. So if I go to the resource, you will notice my web app is available at dev.linogates.azurewebsites.net. If I click on it or click on browse, they will both do the same thing. You will notice it is running. Of course, I didn't deploy anything yet, so that is the default page that will show up when you hit the Dev Linogates website. Sounds good so far? Let me go ahead and close this down. And now I would like to go ahead and make another one. I'm going to go to the resource group one more time. We'll say create. And we will do another web app. We'll say Azure web app. There we go. And I'm going to create one, but this time will be for QA. So let's go ahead and give it another name. And here we'll call it QA Lino Gates, good enough for me. It will also be made on .NET 7.0. I'll use a Windows, and I will use the same exact plan in here for the Lino Gates plan. Excellent. We'll say create. So now we're doing it a little bit faster, and I'm going to do it one last time for production as well, or maybe you can make it as a UAT for user accessibility testing, which is very close to what a production is. So it's definitely up to you how you want to do that. All right, we will make it one more time. So let's go to the resource again, making sure, of course, that it's still working. Yeah, the QA one is working, same exact way. And now I will just go back and create my last server, and we'll say create, and we will come in here, we'll say Azure Web App. We'll click on that, and this one will be the production, for instance. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and do this, and we'll call it prod for production Lino Gates. Okay. We'll still use the .NET 7.0 in my case, and we'll put it in the US, same exact plan. Usually the production will not be on the same plan. You're going to get a much beefier machine or a plan for that, but let's go ahead and put them all for right now. We'll say review and go for it. Excellent. And now we'll wait another few seconds, and this will come back after the deployment is done. All right, all three have been gone. So go to the resource. Make sure that production is working. That is the production Lino Gates, same exact thing. So now I have them pretty much identical. I didn't deploy anything yet, but I have three different environments, and all of them are using the same plan, and we are ready to go. I can always go back to the resource group. Notice I will have three different web service application, like the production, the QA, and the dev. I will also have application insights for each and every single one of them, and I will have one plan, which is the Lino Gates plan, ready for me to go. Make sense? All right. Now we'll go ahead and say thank you to Azure. We'll go back to our Azure DevOps. And at this point, I would like to move from repos. I would like to go to the pipelines. Let's click on pipelines. I usually will not have any pipelines. This is a brand new project we just created. So I'm going to create my first build pipelines. Remember, there is a build pipelines and the release pipelines. So the first thing is going to ask me, where would you like to get this from? Would you like to get it using YAML files from Azure Repos Git, Bitbucket, GitHub, and all of these things? In my case, I'm going to use the classic editor without using YAML. Of course, if you're using YAML, you're more than welcome to do that. You can get it from GitHub, from Azure Repos, Git, Subversion, Bitbucket, and other Git repositories as well, GitLab or anything like that. So first of all, I'm going to use Azure Repos Git. The Lino Gates test is the name of the project. The repository it founded already. It's called Lino Gates test. And the branch that I have right now, which is the automatic one that was created for me, which is the main, I say, yes, that is the one. And now it's going to ask me, which template would you like to use? So if you go down a little bit, there is tons and tons of those. Hopefully we'll find the ASP.NET Core, which is the kind of application I'm building right now. So I'm going to say apply this, and it will add all the different agents information. There are a couple of things that you'll have to specify. First of all, the agent specification. Would you like this run this on a Mac or a Linux machine or a Windows? I'm going to say Windows 2022. You can say latest, it would be the same thing in our case. And I don't have to do anything else in here. Everything will be based on a Visual Studio CS Proj file. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to say, let's save this. And I'm not going to give it a comment. We'll say save it. And we are in pretty good shape at this point, and this will be ready to go. The only thing left for me to take care of the build pipeline is that now that I have set up what the pipeline is supposed to run this on, when should it actually run this specific build? Well, that will be under the triggers all the way to the top. If you click on triggers, notice there is a check mark in here that says enable continuous integration. So if I click on this, that means every time I'm going to be pushing a file, any kind of file that will go into the repository, that will trigger a build automatically to be able to create a new build for the application itself. So that's definitely great. You don't have to really touch anything else. You can actually include branches and filters and so on, but just by being able to having one main branch and you're pushing that into it, it will automatically trigger it right away. Batch changes while a build is in progress. You can turn this on. It's a little bit more advanced, but you're more than welcome to do that. But in reality, this is the only one that you're going to need in here. So I can save, and we'll give a comment saying why I did what I did if you're working with a team environment. And at this point, I can click on queue. That means I can force it right now. So I can actually say, go ahead and build. And it will tell me I'm using the Azure pipelines on a Windows 2022 machine that I'll be borrowing from Azure to run this on. And it will use the main branch to make all this stuff. Okay, let's say run. And now it will actually start a build automatically, and I can actually see what the machine is doing. First of all, it's waiting in line to find out when Azure can give us one of these machines to run this on. So once I'm being queued, oh, okay, I got a machine. So right now it's going to do all of these things, and it will tell you how many seconds is being used to do that, checking out the code from the Azure repo, from Git. It will restore all the .NET NuGet packages or whatever it needs. It will build it, it will test it, it will publish it. Test it means if you had test included, it will run the test as well if you want, and then it will publish it. And at this point, this when it's done, by the way, it will be able to tell us that this system is ready to go, and it will show us that the build is ready. That doesn't mean it has been released, it just has been built and has been configured correctly. Make sense? All right, the restore took about 55 seconds. I stopped the video during that, but now it's doing the build itself. It might take another maybe 20 seconds or so. And after that, everything will run very fast because I don't have a test on this one. So I'll come back once it's done. All right, and maybe less than a minute later, it finished. The build took 39 seconds, and then there was no test. The publish of the website took 3 seconds, and so on. So you can see that the job is pretty much done. But again, nothing got deployed to any of my Azure web applications. This is just to build in a random machine that has Windows 2022 on it, and all the stuff happened for me. Now, if I'm good and happy that everything was successful and my agent was able to do the job, I can go click on releases, and I can actually start creating a release for that. Now we do not have any pipelines yet. I'm going to create my new pipeline under releases. We'll click on new pipeline. And the first thing is going to ask me, what exactly are you trying to do? And in reality, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to deploy whatever happened in the build. I'd like to deploy it to an Azure App Service deployment. So I'm going to apply that. And it will tell me what exactly you'd like to do. So the first one will be the dev machine. Remember the dev, the QA, and the production. So the first one will be the dev machine, and I will be the owner. I'm the only user right now. That's great. And I'm going to go ahead in here and we'll say close this guy. Notice the dev in here. All right, so for the stage to do this job and send it to dev, what exactly do I need to do? First of all, I need to have an artifact. What is the artifact? The artifact is whatever came out of the build, right? So I just build right now automatically. So I'm going to need an artifact in here. And it could be coming from a different Azure repo or a GitHub or a team foundation services. I'm going to actually go for build, and I will look into the project for Linux test. And if I did my job right, this is the name of the build. So if you go back to the pipeline for the build, that would be the name. I can change the name, of course, if I want to, but this is good enough for me. And it will use the latest version, all right, because you can have different versions, of course, available that has been running. But I'm going to take the latest version. I'm going to say add. Excellent. So from now on, I'm going to say get whatever artifact got created from the pipeline. And I would like you to go ahead and start the first stage of dev. Let's click on this one job, one task in here, see what that is. First of all, I have to identify what my subscription that I want to use. I'm going to use my Microsoft Regional Directory subscription. I'm going to click on authorize to make sure it gets authorized as well. So not anybody can actually use that from me. That would be bad. So let's give it a few seconds in here. And okay, it's done. The next one, the type of app that you're trying to do is a web app on Windows or a web app on Linux or on a container or a function app, all of these things. In my case, it is a web app on Windows. And the app service name, remember how many we created? So this is an important piece as well. I have a dev, I have a prod, and I have a QA. There are 3 web servers that I was able to see inside of there. Okay, so I'm going to use this one as the dev. Excellent. I'm going to click on save. I'll give it a nice comment to say why I'm doing that. We'll say okay there. And from that point on, this is ready. Pretty much I can go back to the releases again. And there is my new release pipeline. I can give it another name if I want to. We'll say edit. And there it is. Now I have the artifact coming in from the build pipeline. And now I have my dev. There is no red line anymore. It knows exactly what to do with that. So let's go ahead and create 2 more, even though I'm not going to create them the correct way to beginning, but it's easier to do that. I'm going to say add another stage. And this stage in here will also be an app service deployment. This one will be the QA one, like that. And in here for the QA, I'm going to close it down. I'm going to click on the one job. We'll do exactly the same thing we did before. We go to the Microsoft Regional Director one, service connection, and this one will be QA. Let's find the QA one. There you go. And we'll say save, and we'll put a nice comment here, hopefully for the rest of the team as well. And we should be good to go. Let's go back. We'll do it one last time. We'll say edit. And I'm going to add another stage in here. We'll say new stage. It's also going to be an app service deployment. This one will be production. Production. We'll close this guy up and we'll do the same thing exactly one more time. I'm going to use my own subscription in here. And then finally, we'll use production for the Lino Gates. Save, put a comment, and now we can easily go back and edit, and you will be able to see that all of them are going to be available. What does that mean? It's important to understand what we're doing in here. What happens in here is that this build will be triggered automatically every time I'm going to be pushing a file or committing a file and pushing a file into the repository for my local machine. That will get built automatically. But at the same time, I want to make sure that after it gets built, I want to trigger all of these things. So if I click on this trigger, continuous deployment trigger, let's click on it, and you notice right now it is disabled. That means, yes, it will build it automatically, but it will not go any further than that. So I need to actually enable this. There is a new features, of course, in Azure DevOps for pull request triggers as well. I'm going to leave this off for right now, but again, and you can bring it in from other branches and so on. So it can be more complicated, but no problem. The user interface is pretty good with that. So I'm going to enable this. Great. Let's go ahead and save this, and we'll put a comment, hopefully why I enabled that. But the issue here is that each and every single one of these guys will happen at the same time. And this is maybe not something that you want to do. So when this gets built, it will automatically send it to dev, send it to QA, and send it to production one by one. It will not wait for anybody. And that's probably not what you want to do. So what I want to do is that for the QA one, to have a different stage. That means I want it to come after the dev, and the production, I want it to come after the QA. So let's click on the trigger in here for pre-deployment condition. And notice here is after the release. No, I want it after a stage. So click on this guy, and the stage will be after dev. So now notice it moves automatically and it will be happening after the QA. Great, let me go ahead and save this guy, put a comment if I want to. And finally for the production, I will do the same thing. We'll say after a stage, and this will be after the QA stage. And we'll say save. We'll give it a comment, and I feel like I'm in a much better shape. And now, even though they will continue automatically. So in this specific video, I'm not going to go into when to send it. So right now, this will build, but it will send it to dev first, not at the same time with the others. And then after it finished from dev, if it's successful, it will move to QA. If it's successful, move to production. Later on, we're going to see how to do an approval. And then in the final video, we'll see how to actually enter gates between each and every single one of them. But for right now, hopefully it makes sense. And I think the last thing I wanted to show you is that now that I've set everything up, will it automatically work for me when I actually make a change and compile and put something inside of the repository? Okay, let's go ahead and give it a shot. I'm going to go back in here to Visual Studio. I need to stop it from running. Okay, there you go. Control C, that will stop it from running. I'm going to go back to my files. Let's open up the pages. And I'm going to go, let's say, to the index page where it says welcome. I'm going to say welcome Lino to CI/CD. How about that? Okay, so we'll say save. Now it's saved. And the only thing left for me now is to check this file in. It's like first change. Okay. And I'm going to say commit and push. It's going to happen really fast because there is only one file. So let me do this. And I would like to go and see what the pipeline is doing right now. Notice it has an hourglass. That means it got triggered automatically. So now that's the first pipeline. That's the build pipeline. So I can open up the staging and I can see the whole projects being built. Not being released, not being built. So when this stuff is done, it will trigger another thing to be able to send it to dev. And then when dev is successful, we'll send it to QA. And when that is successful, we'll send it to production. So the whole idea here, once this finishes, is right now Azure is trying to look for an available machine to run the build on. So we will wait here a few seconds until it finds one, and then it's a Windows 2022 machine. So I'm going to stop the video until we get the honor of getting one of the machines by Azure so we can actually run the build, and I'll come back when this is started. And as you can see here, it's finishing up. It was able to take maybe about a minute, minute and a half max to be able to find out. It's almost 2 minutes now, but it's publishing the artifact. But the good news is once this is done, it will pass it over to my release, because I said this is dependent on that. So we'll give it a few seconds in here for the publication of the artifact. Once it's done, I'm going to go to the releases and let you see what's happening in there. Let's click on the releases. And notice there are now 3 stages. There is the dev, the QA, and the production as well. That is my release number 1. And if I put my cursor over it, it's in progress. It's already being deployed to the dev machine in Azure, which is very cool. I didn't touch anything. It will all be done based on the settings I did for my release pipeline. You can always click on the release one in here, and you can see exactly what's happening. You see the artifact is available, and it triggered the stage for dev. That is the progress happening. And then the QA will be triggered right after that. And once it's done, it will trigger the production. It's one after the other, not at the same time like the other one, like it was in the beginning. So that will be dependent on each and every single one by one. So hopefully it will not take too long, maybe a few seconds. And I'm going to stop the video and come back when at least the dev is done. Awesome. Look what happened, folks. The dev is successful. It has been deployed. It's now going to start doing the same thing again, initializing the job and everything for the QA. So while this is happening, maybe it's a good idea to go click on the Azure and go ahead and open up maybe the dev web application. And if it actually did work, if I say browse, it should say welcome Lino to the CI/CD. It did work. See, that is the new text that I changed in my HTML for that page. Alrighty. If I actually change the word dev in here all the way in the beginning to QA, oops, let me fix that. And I want to use instead of dev really quickly before it finishes, QA, it will still say Lino. Oh, right now it's deploying. So I will not be able to touch it still. But let me go ahead and see if it's just a spelling. I'm going to go back in here. We'll say go to the QA one. There it is. And we'll say browse. Oh, it's because I put an extra F here for whatever reason, okay? That's okay, but it did already finish, so unfortunately I didn't do it fast enough. Even though it did not finish, the code is already there, and it's finishing up right now. But the production will probably not be there still. Let me go to the production one, do it quickly. All right, there you go, and we'll say browse. And notice the application has not been deployed at all, okay? So the application has not been deployed to production yet at all. And there you go, it started. So hopefully within the next maybe 1 minute max, production will be able to deploy this. And right now it's deploying. So actually if I go and browse again, no, we'll keep refreshing until we see when actually the application will be deployed. All right, we'll give it another maybe 10 seconds or so, and after that that would be enough for the first video. I just wanted to show you how we created 3 different stages, did everything based on a continuous integration and building, and then the continuous deployment for the release pipelines themselves. So hopefully you can see how easy that is once you understand what's going on. In the next video of this series, we're going to continue with that, but this time I'm going to put an approvals on each and every single one. I don't want automatically to go from dev to QA. That's not how it works in real life. We want to make sure that there are some smoke tests that happens on dev, some kind of knowing that it's not dead on arrival. Okay, something is blatantly bad, so I don't want to waste QA time to look at something that we really were not ready for. And then once we approve it, it will move to QA. And same thing going to production. That's a big deal. I might have multiple people having to approve before it goes to production, and that's what we're going to do in the next one. Let me refresh production one more time. Oh, there you go. Production is ready to go, and welcome Lino to CI/CD. And I hope this was useful to see. Thank you for being with me for about half an hour, but we did a lot of things, right? We did a repository in Azure DevOps. We created 3 applications in Azure. We deployed, we created a build pipeline, we created a release pipeline, and hopefully that makes a lot of sense. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.